Welcome to the Crown Scored Panthers Draft Recap. Joining us as always, Reggie Walker, John Ellis, and we have a special guest today, someone who I networked with when I first moved to Charlotte 4 years ago, believe it or not. Now fortunate enough to call him a friend, WCNC Sports Director Nick Carboni. Nick, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm good, guys. Shout out to the original Hartford Whalers. None of that nonsense up in Raleigh. No throwbacks here.
Hey, they do have the best record in hockey. That's the first game. That's the first team I ever saw play.
Just don't wear the whale. That's all I ask.
I agree with you. Well, it should be a fun show. Before we get into it, I don't know if any of y'all saw it, but Nick put together a 10-minute mock draft scenario. I think it was this past Thursday, like a 10-minute run through with Julian Council, who co-hosts the 704 podcast, Locked On Panthers podcast, former Panther Eugene Robinson, and our own John Ellis. Nick, that looked very cool.
I appreciate it.
How'd you come up with that, and what was the whole gist of that?
Yeah, and I don't think it's like my original idea. I think everybody, as we get into like mock draft season, as you have that build up to draft day, by like Wednesday, you're like, all right, what's going to happen? Like, what are they going to talk about in that room? And they show you those draft war rooms now with those live cameras and even after the fact. And I've always really been fascinated with what are they talking about? What different opinions are being thrown out? What different perspectives from different, people within that room are being thrown out. And in the past, we've kind of role played like, what we would do with the particular pick. This time I wanted to like put a clock on it, put some pressure on it. John did a great job playing our general manager, Scott Fitterer. And I don't know what fake Scott Fitterer did in the second round, but I can't imagine John would have traded that many times. But man, that was a whirlwind. But it was fun. It was just, and I wanted to kind of present the likely scenario that Justin Fields would be available, and whatever else was available, and that's kind of how it went down. I mean, it was fun that it mocked that. We ended up going with like Micah Parsons, which I'm not sure any of us. But that's the thing. Like whoever's got the finger on the button, they get to make the pick.
Right.
So,
it
was fun.
You used the full 10 minutes. Carolina almost used that full 10 minutes Thursday night, and that was a very high drama-filled 10 minutes. Go ahead, Rich.
I got a bone to pick with a whole lot of teams on the 10 minutes thing. Do they really need to use? Look,
Does
man, you've been
Jacksonville
on the
need
clock for how long?
They want to keep
It's
you on
TV,
edge, Rich.
man. Look at the
TV show.
Reg, you've got Emmys. I think Kevin has Emmys. I'm not sure though.
Yeah,
it's TV. It's all drama. It's all
absolutely.
You got it.
Absolutely.
Well, the drama did build, and I think it started when San Francisco took Trey Lance at 3.
Yeah,
and then we all started to realize that this Justin Fields scenario that you just said, Nick, is going to be a scenario.
Yeah, and for a while we thought it would be Penei Sewell and Fields, and I think the Panthers would have had to get Penei Sewell in that spot as much as they like J.C. Horn. But it didn't come down to that. The Lions, luckily for them, took him out of that position, and then I think for Carolina. Not in our minds at home, probably, but in their minds, they knew what they were doing at that point. They were going to pick up J.C. Horn. They were going to pick up a defensive starter.
Yeah, they inevitably picked up J.C. Horn, but I think like once Cincinnati passed on Sewell, and Reggie, you pointed out last week they were going to do that because they're Cincinnati and they're not logical. The tension started to build, and all of a sudden you're sitting there at 7, and it's like, wow, we're going to get a chance at either Sewell or Justin Fields here. Yeah. And then, as you said, Sewell goes off the board at 7. And that 8.5, 9 minutes where they were just sitting there, it's like, is it going to be Fields? Is it going to be Horn? Is it going to be Surtain? Is it going to be somebody else? I thought it was going to be Fields. And then when Goodell came up and announced Horn, John, let's go with you. What did you make of that pick?
I wasn't shocked. I mean, I'd heard from a source earlier in the week that Horn was the highest graded corner on their list and was a guy that if he was available at 8 would be very likely. What I did hear also, there was some consternation among Panthers Twitter, and I was following along live. The Mac Jones slide was going to be, oh boy, here we go, Mac Jones Senior Bowl. A lot of Panthers fans weren't high on that. I was told by an unimpeachable source that was never going to happen at number 8. So when I heard that, and I narrowed it down between Horn and Sewell. That's how I saw it, and Fields as well. I got the sense that the owner was more interested in Fields than maybe the coach. I think Joe Person reported that as well. Maybe I'm misstating that, but I think generally speaking, most reporting I've seen on that also sort of reflects that I think the quarterback reach for Fields might have been more on the ownership side and less on the scouting and, coaching side. But I thought it was a very good pick. Horn is the lockdown corner they need in this defense. I think we've talked about him in the past a good bit. He's long. He's got Jalen Ramsey traits. But, yeah, I thought it was great theater leading up. There were a lot of options. I think if Swell was on the board, they might have taken.
Yeah, for me, I thought the same thing. I thought, the offensive tackle was the obvious pick. And I think I had said earlier in the week and even leading up to the draft, in this order for me at 8, it's Sewell, and then Slater, if he's there, right, that's an option. Surtain, that was kind of my 3. And so when I saw Sewell come off the board, I didn't think they would go Slater that high. And so right there, I'm thinking to myself, it's Surtain. And here's the thing. Do I think Horn is a bad pick or do I disagree? No, I don't disagree with the pick at all. I thought, in my opinion, and again, they've got several more people looking at this thing and coming to a conclusive decision than just my set of eyes. And unlike John Ellis, I don't have as well a placed source in the organization. Let me go ahead and give credit where credit is due. But I pretty much felt like Surtain was one of those guys that you draft somewhere from 7 to 10, and Horn was like 11 to 13, 11 to 14 type range. So I didn't feel like they were reaching down to go get a guy like J.C. Horn. Thought he was a really good player. I tend to like a corner that's a little bit longer because you're starting to see receivers that are 6'4" and 6'5" in this league. Surtain comes from an organization or at least a program at the collegiate level. They play a lot of man. They play a lot of zone. They play a lot of combo coverages. So mentally, I like where he's coming from. Now, that doesn't mean that Horn can't do those things and didn't learn some of those things in South Carolina. But the pedigree that guys are coming from. Just remember this. I don't think people think about this. The position coach for Patrick Surtain at Alabama is Nick Saban. It's not someone else. Nick Saban coaches those defensive backs, particularly the corners. So that's another reason why I was very much leaning, if you will, if I had to split hairs between Surtain and Horn, leaning towards Surtain. And then obviously both guys come from NFL fathers. One comes from the stock of a receiver, Horn, right. Joe Horn's son. And then Surtain, obviously P2, his father played corner in this league as well. So when you look at it from that standpoint, I thought it was splitting hairs. I'm not upset about the pick. I don't have a problem with the pick, but I think I text you right away, Kevin. When I saw Sewell come off the board, I said, this has got to be Surtain right now. And when it wasn't, I wasn't upset. I was a little bit surprised, but I wasn't upset.
I think that obviously they're going to look at Fields, Darnold, taking Horn, not Fields, trading for Darnold. That's going to be looked at for a long time and compared. That's how the draft works. So I think in that moment when they picked J.C. Horn, now that I reflect on it, it really told us two different things. One, that Scott Fitterer and Matt Rule went into that draft with conviction of what they were going to do and what they were not going to do. And two, I think that we found out a little bit of David Tepper's patience level, because I think at times, and this is, all across football operations, I think at times he's had high patience. I think at times he's had low patience. And there was this kind of caricature thing that we had in our mind leading up to the draft with any NFL owner, or at least vocal ones like David Tepper, where you think he's going to be the guy pounding the table, go get me a quarterback, go get me a quarterback. Now, he may have wanted a quarterback for a lot of other reasons besides football, but it told me that he's going to let Scott Fitterer and Matt Rule, for now, try to build this football team.
I totally agree by that. I thought they did a great job, and Tepper in particular, of being neutral and allowing his football people to operate. That's the word I'm hearing from people I talk to, is how smooth the process was from Fitterer, Rule, and how in harmony the football people were. It felt to me like the football people were more involved this year than usual, scouting wise, the coaches. It just seemed like with Marty, and I love Marty. Marty did a lot of good things, but I think it was a different philosophy. The trading back was obviously a huge goal coming in, and they met that goal. I thought they were going to trade back when they didn't end up, with Sewell on the board. I felt trade back at that point, because I was hearing coming in that was a big thing in their mind, that they were going to try to trade back early. Obviously, it came a little bit later in the draft, but I thought they were very disciplined. I don't trade draft grades, all that. I mean, it's losing, need some sleep here. Draft grades. It's hard to draft a draft grade on these guys right now without seeing them play, but the process was very sound, I thought.
Agreed.
I agree with the process being sound in this regard, because you made a good point about the football people and the owner, because owners often say, let me go get a box office hit, right? Let me go get somebody that I think is going to move the needle. And coaches and GMs and scouts are always saying, we need to build out a roster. And this is a football team that going into this draft and really going into this whole offseason had a lot of holes, had a lot of things they needed to fix. There's a reason why Matt Rule's entering his second season. There's a reason why there's a new general manager, right? You go through years of struggle, years of not winning. You have to change some things over. And so I think changing over the roster and staying focused on that was very, very important. And to your point, John, in terms of draft grades, I'm with you. I don't think this is about giving grades, A's, B's, C's, D's, or E's. I think the only thing you can look at as an organization is whatever you have on your board, not what's on Reggie's board as a quote need, but what's on the organization's board as a need. Did you draft to those needs? And if you felt like you did that, you got at least somebody to address each position. I don't know if I totally agree with drafting a long snapper in the 6th round, but that's just me. But if you felt like you addressed every position of need, but I also understood it, because eventually you have to get younger, because that's how you get cheaper in the National Football League. So I understand it. But the reality is you have to find a way to build out the entire roster if you want to compete long-term and try to play for championships. And I felt like Scott Fitterer and Matt Rule and even David Tepper, to some degree, whether he was involved or not, he was smart enough to let whatever happened as the owner and not playing GM, not playing Jerry Jones, right? To allow the people that he hired to build the football team into a winner. He allowed them to do that, I thought, in this draft.
Now, Nick, to your point, you said Tepper really let Fitterer and Rule really go about their draft. And night 2 is where Fitterer, I thought, really made his money. I mean, he traded back twice, but in a sense, he also traded up and gaining 2 third-round picks, which he later traded 1. But night 2, he picks up LSU receiver Terrace Marshall Jr., BYU tackle Brady Christensen, who may be able to start week 1 at the left side, and blocking tight end from Notre Dame, Tommy Tremble, in the 3rd round. Nick, your thoughts on night 2?
Well, just first of all, in terms of Fitterer's flurry, I guess we'll call it, especially over the second 2 days. Give me one of those Emmys. Send it over. All right.
I think got something to spare.
Yeah. I think that we saw a really promising younger GM in his first draft make deft moves and outplay a lot of other GMs around the league in terms of what he picked up and what he turned this draft into. So let's give him credit for that. 2 of the guys you just mentioned are probably my 2 most intriguing players. I mean, J.C. Horn's intriguing because he's the 1st-round pick, and I think he's going to be solid. But Christensen is intriguing because if he can be any semblance of consistency, and if he can compete to be the starting left tackle day 1 and stay there, and that's a big if. He's not a 1st-round pick like Jordan Gross, right? I know they're both from Utah, but to me, that's where the comparisons end. Let's see how he plays. If he can be that guy, that is a steal. And the other one you mentioned, Tommy Tremble, he's a vicious blocker, and he's not a move type tight end like a George Kittle or a Gesicki, whatever. But he should be able to get the ball in situations in the red zone, in goal line packages from Joe Brady that should absolutely add so many dynamics to what this team can do in scoring situations. So I'm really excited to see what they can unlock with him. And at the end of the day with Tremble, I mean, the dude is just, Matt Rule always talks about serious football people. The first thing he said when he talked to the media was he's violent and versatile. So there you go. That was all Matt Rule needed.
2 good traits to have. 2 good traits to have for an offensive lineman.
Seriously, though, I think Marshall, getting back to the point, if they're going to spread it out more, right, and open this offense up, and you're going to see some situations where he and Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore Arnold at the tight end, maybe they go 2 tight ends at times and really spread this thing out, or you go 3 wides with a tight end and Christian McCaffrey, a whole lot of different possibilities. What does that look like for this team? And if they're going to push it down the field more with a guy who I would argue is slightly less mobile than Teddy, then Christensen's going to have to be able to step in and help. This offensive line is going to have to be more than effective. So Marshall, to me, is intriguing because I'm wondering what that means in terms of how the offense is going to look. Does that mean they're going to push it deep? Because look, Marshall can run. We know DJ can run and Robbie can run as well. So 3 guys that can really stretch the field vertically. And so it's going to be a matter of how it all plays itself out.
I think Marshall made the majority of his catches at LSU in the 2nd and 3rd level. So that excites you if Darnold can get it to him there.
Yeah,
that's a big if. It was always the if with Curtis Samuel. So let's see if Darnold can get it to Marshall in those spots, and if Marshall can achieve that separation in the pros.
So Scott Fitterer has done a really good job at filling a lot of holes in this first offseason as Panthers general manager, and he continued to do so on day 3. And here's a roundup of his final picks. OK State running back Chuba Hubbard, Iowa D tackle Davion Nixon, a corner from Washington and Keith Taylor, an absolute behemoth of an offensive lineman in Deontay Brown, 6'3", 365. He looked like one of those guys that we saw in those Dallas Cowboys lines from the mid-'90s.
Yeah.
Shi Smith, at a receiver out of South Carolina, who I think has some serious hidden gem potential. A long snapper, Thomas Fletcher, and a D tackle in Phil Hoskins from Kentucky. 6 players from the SEC. All in all, how did Fitterer do in this first draft as Panthers GM?
Go ahead. I thought the 3rd day was the gem. Obviously, to get Nixon that late, who was regarded as one of the best 3 techniques in this draft, was fantastic. I thought Chuba Hubbard was a good pickup. He's a multi-purpose type of guy, good in the screen game, gives you a chance to employ 2 of the backs at the same time. They did a little bit of that with C.J. Anderson at one point. It's that 21 pony package they used to run. It's going to be fun to watch that. But I thought, the offensive line, and also we talk so much about tackle, getting a guard that can come in and compete right away with that size. If he can get his weight down, because that was the big knock at the Senior Bowl, he came in overweight. If he can keep it within reach, it's like 340, and that's hard to say that's reasonable for him, but that's his good playing weight. You get up to 370, you got some issues. You keep it around 330. I'm not even kidding. That's about where he was, and that's 330, 340 is where he needs to be. He can play at that with the length he has, even though he's a little bit, I guess, undersized, they say, but he plays long, and he's just got such a powerful punch. He's got that Larry Allen punch. His first contact on some of these, he had Derek Brown hitched up on roller skates in that game against Auburn. So I'm fascinated to watch his development. Shi Smith as well, maybe a gadget guy. He's a local kid from Union right down the road here, and looking to see if he can fill that Samuel role. I thought it was a very good day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the depth, and I'm sure Matt Rule appreciates the depth. Even that second corner going off the board might not seem like a big deal, but now in an ideal world, you'll have J.C. Horn and Dante Jackson, mix in A.J. Boye when he comes back, and then Troy Pride Jr. and Stanley Thomas Oliver aren't in positions that are completely unfair to them. So you get an extra corner, beefing up the interior offensive line. We'll see what Brown can become. He's apparently lost a ton of weight since that picture we were all looking at and marveling over, quite frankly. I love that. And, Shi Smith, that versatility, he's probably not going to be out on the field too much on the offensive snaps, but if he can give this team a returner that they haven't had in a while, that'd be great. And then, and Nixon, that from everything you read and hear, he's had some issues. But if he can, stay on the level and live up to some of the potential that he apparently has, that's going to be a great plug and play there. Long snapper, that is a football guy pick right there. It's all about the ops time. All about the ops time and good snaps. Now, J.J. Jansen, that guy deserves so much credit because for a dozen years, he has absolutely been incredibly consistent. But it looks like they're probably going to be moving on from him. I think. I don't know.
Might be.
Yeah, I would think so if you're going to use a pick on the position.
Yeah.
I would hope so at least if you're because here's what I do know. They're not going to carry 2 long snappers.
No.
That's what I do know.
No.
So I'm going to go put it this way. I don't know that, but I'll put a whole lot of money on the fact that they will not carry 2 long snappers. And if I'm wrong, I'm just wrong. The guy that I really liked in this draft that they picked up, I thought Chuba Hubbard was huge. And the reason why is I thought last year, for whatever reason, and if anybody has seen my Twitter, they saw me going crazy about running the football. But I think now you get Christian McCaffrey back. I think the first conversation you got to have with him is, listen, there's going to be times where you need to come off the field. And it's about making sure you're available in big moments for us. And now they've got a guy in Chuba Hubbard who's been a bell cow back. for several years at Oklahoma State. So he can take some of the pounding. And if he can find a way, I think if this is a guy that can take, 20 to 25 snaps a game from McCaffrey, which could be somewhere between 7 and 10 carries, but mostly decoy in the passing game so that McCaffrey's just not unnecessarily on the field. I think this becomes a great value pick. It's a 4th-round running back, so you're not paying a whole lot of money. But this is a guy that's pretty good in pass protection. He can take it to top off of it, running the football as well, and he's not a bad receiver out of the backfield. So I thought they got a really good piece to add to that backfield to give McCaffrey and those guys some opportunities to be on the bench for a snap or two here or there, make sure they're fully fresh in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I agree with Reggie. I mean, I think this is the year that you've got to figure out how to do that with McCaffrey. In years past, it's been like, well, he can take it. He loves it. He's chasing records. Let's do it. And it caught up to him last year. I know that the first 2 injuries weren't similar, but the third injury was trying to rehab from the second injury.
Yeah.
And you cannot have this guy off the field for that. I mean, not even close to that amount of time this year. So there's got to be a balance, and McCaffrey's got to understand that too.
Yeah, he's way too important to this organization going forward, especially if they want to win.
Well, and you just need teams to have to game plan for him every week.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Nick, tell Chuba Hubbard not to call Cameron Artis Payne and ask him out.
Good call.
The last time McCaffrey was in the starting lineup for a win was November of 2019.
Wow.
He's hungry to get back out there and win.
Yeah.
And to your point, Nick, I think Reggie's the same thing. You want him in the big moments. So I think it gives him an opportunity to play at a more maybe 85% rate rather than a 98% carry rate. They can't go down that road again with them. It's just not going to work out.
Yeah. Nick, we'd be doing this podcast a disservice if we didn't ask you about the Hornets. We got a couple minutes left, so pretty quickly. I mean, we had LaMelo return over the weekend. He kind of auditioned to be the Panthers quarterback with some of the passes that he was let fly at Spectrum. Malik Monk is back. There are 8 games left. They got waxed on Sunday by Miami. 5 games at Spectrum and some winnable games, especially this week. Detroit, Chicago, Orlando in 4 nights. How optimistic are you with 8 games left?
Yeah, I've got to think they're still going to make this new play-in format. And be a 7 to 10. It'd be great if they could just be at least an 8 seed to say like, yeah, we're a legit playoff team in the Eastern Conference
and host a game.
Right. And I think no matter what, they're going to have to play the play-in format, which given the rash of injuries here in April, that really kind of really slowed them down and kind of put them in a backward slide. LaMelo, I mean, you just see what he brings to the court. I mean, it's fun. It's effortless. It's dazzling. It's amazing that he's 19 years old and he's got the wherewithal to do this stuff and the touch to pull it off. I mean, the baseball pass to Rozier on Sunday night was amazing. Saturday night, the scoop pass, length of the court, right into the hands of Miles Bridges. I mean, if Scott Fitterer wasn't on the phone after that, then what is he doing? I mean, this guy can put it on a dime. Yeah, and he can shoot better than we all thought too. So it's been an exciting year. It's been tough to watch this last month, but I'm really hopeful with those 2 guys back that they'll be able to get in the postseason. And speaking of injured stars, you can't ignore the fact that Gordon Hayward hasn't been on the floor for a while.
Right.
That's right. And I want to make 2 points about LaMelo Ball, and you hit on one of them in terms of his shooting. And one of the things I said when he was getting ready to come out in the draft, and a lot of people said he can't shoot. One of the things I felt like is I didn't think his shooting motion was messed up. I didn't think it was bad. Like so many people had an issue with his brothers who looked worse than Sean Marion's jumper, but somehow Sean Marion had a pretty good career in the NBA. So there's that. But what I thought with LaMelo was his shot selection. And I thought over this year so far, you could see from game 1 to now, he has improved with his shot selection. And I think that's very important. That clearly he's taking the coaching, he's taking the maturity. And that's another thing. I think a lot of us were so used to what his dad was and what his dad is and the antics and all of that. This kid went through it all in a more on top of him way than even his older brother Lonzo did, and LiAngelo, the middle brother. And I think he learned from that. I think he grew up a little bit faster because of that. And he had to figure out real quick how to be his own man, right, if you will. So I give him credit in those 2 regards. And then lastly, I think the way he plays and him being able to play up tempo with Rozier in that backcourt, look, I was very critical of the Miles Bridges draft pick several years ago because I was wondering what his skill set is, right? Athletic guy who can run the floor and finish. He's turned into a really good jump shooter, a solid 3-point shooter as well. But more than anything, that up and down tempo plays right into his game, right into his ability to slash and cut. And then you have good passers. Rozier's a willing passer. I think that's infectious coming from LaMelo. LaMelo, obviously a really good passer. Hayward, willing as well. You start looking at all these guys that are willing to make those passes, the cuts, the violent cuts that Miles Bridges is willing to make, and some other guys too. LaMelo will cut off the ball as well. I think that's really opened it up for those guys to really move the ball because guys are consistently moving, putting pressure on the defense in so many ways. So I think that goes right back to not only Coach Borrego, but LaMelo and those older guys on that roster being willing to defer to LaMelo and create those situations.
And Miles go ahead.
Oh, when they said he had LaMelo had a rough shooting form on draft night, I was like, oh God, how bad is it going to be? And I looked at his tape from Australia and I was like, you know what? It's not like MKG. So I think maybe it could work. Anybody who thinks LaMelo is bad compared to that, I'll tell you.
Yeah, and Miles has turned into he plays defense. I mean, he's turned into an all-around, just a great force on the floor. And I hope they find a way to lock him up long-term. Nick, thank you so much for coming on. You're one of the busiest sports guys in town. So I thank you for coming on. And
even though I'm off on a Monday, go figure that.
Hey, that's a schedule, man.
So I bet
it's good to be on with you guys.
Football season.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So thank you for coming on and shooting it up with us for a little bit. And I guess we'll see you all next week on Ground Score.
It's good to talk to you guys. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you, Nick. Thanks, man.
See y'all.
See ya.